so-called protection of areas in the global south, let's say the rainforest. But while that sounds like a good idea, the communities in the rainforest that have been sold this carbon market mechanism where conservation, they're going to save their lands and territories, corporations are buying assets, that's what they're calling them, in the rainforest, in these beautiful biodiverse regions, so that they can offset their operations, so they can get to so-called net zero. That's not net zero. We need real zero.
There is the inability of some in the global south to travel to Glasgow because of the pandemic time around, and that brought the question of whose voice gets heard here to the forefront. I'm wondering how you reconcile being here when so many others can't.
You know, my organization calls for the postponement or canceling of this COP because of that. And then we've also recognized that if we can make it here, we have to speak even louder. We're not here just to talk about Canada. We're here to talk about the fact that there's a global Indigenous movement that is saying that we can't afford to continue to debate the merits of how to save the economy. We need to be advancing real solutions that include real reduction in emissions, but also the safeguards for human and Indigenous rights. And we also need to empower Indigenous peoples to have a seat at the table so that we can bring forward our knowledge to ensure that we're moving in the right direction.
How long do you have to wait to get a seat at the table?
Well, you know, the Local Communities Indigenous Peoples platform is that step in the right direction. That normally science, you know, in policy and government, we talk about science being the best way to inform policy. And what the challenge has been is we're saying Indigenous knowledge needs to be included on par with scientific information, and that we need to utilize our knowledges to inform climate policy at the international level. And that trickles down to how is that going to happen at the state level. And this is an important lever for us. So the people within the Local Communities Indigenous Peoples platform now have the ears of the UN Secretariat, but also they get to sit in rooms and negotiate these terms with state leaders. This has given us sort of one measure closer to having recognition as critical agents to driving climate solutions.
As an Indigenous person and as a person who's working in a capacity here where you feel you're representing other Indigenous people who can't be here, how will you measure the success of this?
I think we'll measure the success in this is if we see those safeguard languages included in the negotiations for Article 6, for loss and damages, you know, for gender and women's rights. We're going to be seeing the continuation of advocating for Indigenous rights languages throughout the negotiations. And then secondarily, how do we move to having more recognition in decision-making powers? Probably within Canada first, because that's where I can advocate for. But then if we set those precedences, we can advocate for developing nations, and we have this trickle-down effect.
Ariel Durante, thank you very much for talking with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's pretty easy to find time and space to speak with Ariel Durante, Paul Prosper, and Edson Krenak. They're all in Glasgow to make their voices heard. But many other Indigenous people and leaders didn't make the trip. Some could not. Others don't think it's worth the time.
My name is Dana Tija Tram, and I am the chief of the Vantakwajin First Nation.
He's in Old Crow, Yukon. Chief Tija Tram, hello.
Hi there, thank you for having me.
Why did you make the decision to stay at home versus coming to Glasgow?
Well, I went to COP25 in Madrid, Spain, and that was a jarring experience. What I found at COP25 was a tiny little pavilion far away from all of the other nations and countries who did not visit the Indigenous pavilion. What really did it for me was the day that I'd seen human rights really get undermined at the negotiation tables in the actualization of the Paris Accord. And I saw this leverage being taken away from Indigenous peoples, and everyone running around in suits with coffee cups and a croissant in their laptops, and it broke my heart. But I find the powerful discussions that should be happening at the COP tables right in my community. That's where the strength is, and I've realized that over COP, where I could be educating others, my education, my power, my direction comes from a community 80 miles north of the Arctic Circle that is having the level and integrity of discussions that really should be had at the international tables.
Now, we heard from someone named Edson Krenak. He's from the Banriwi clan in Brazil, and he came to Glasgow. He's thinking it's very important to be here. I asked him about your view of things, and while he called you his brother and said he respects your decision, he also wanted you to reconsider because, and these are his exact words, he wants you to share your visions, your hopes, and also your struggles with the people here. And I'm wondering what you make of his plea.
I appreciate that, and you know, it is important, but at the same time,